taking whatever instrument you have and being like, how can I make noise out of this in a way that it's not, quote unquote, traditionally meant to? So let's start with the plugins. In my mind, there's kind of three overarching categories that I would say for plugins when trying to do this kind of sound design. First, I would say is digitize, so making something sound more computery or robotic or digital. Second, transform, just completely destroying and augmenting a sound just from so far from what it was. And ambient, so just really dragging it out and making it just like really spacey. And so I've got some examples up here. I'm sure most of us are familiar with these as is, but I do find that, to go over real quick, some things like ring modulation, obviously classic for digitization. Morph is super interesting in terms of transform, being able to just combine two sounds essentially and make a brand new sound palette out of those. So now we've talked about the plugins, let's look at the alternate play methods I mentioned. There's a lot of ways to approach this, of course, because every musical instrument is different, but I've brought up two examples that I love that I really want to share. This is a great one I found on TikTok. Now, this person is using guitar pickups. It's not actually a guitar, but if you've got a guitar, you can do the same thing at home. I love that so much. It's like one of the best things I've found last year. The second example I want to pull up is from a sound designer some of you may know, Akash the Car. If you don't know him, look him up. He is phenomenal. If you do know him, he's a really cool dude, I'm sure you know. But anyway, one thing he loves to do with sound design, he's talked about this before, is he loves to take just regular dental floss and pluck the threaded areas of the cello strings at the bottom. It's really wild, and you get some just creepy sounds from it. So gets my every time. All right, so now that I've talked about some of these alternate play methods, the plugins, I would love to share an example from my own work to sort of take you through the entire process that I've had with this. So I am a guitar player. I play a few different things, but this is one of my guitars. And it looks pretty like a normal guitar at first glance. But if you look closely, there's something that's a little different about it. It's got this arcade button on there, and I'm sure for any guitar players in here, you know that doesn't really come standard on a guitar. What that is actually a kill switch. So as you may know, if you've used them before, you push the button, the sound goes off. You let go, the sound comes back on. Straightforward in theory, but in practice, you can get some really crazy things, especially with the right plugins and the right play methods. There's a local indie band I love that uses this to great effect. They're called Rage Against the Machine. Right. Yeah, so anyway, this is an amazing example from those guys. So Tom Morello, of course, is using this in a very musical context, but the sound he's making from the guitar is completely divested from what a guitar kind of normally sounds like. It sounds like people have said turntable, robot, whatever. It's very kind of non-musical in the traditional guitar sense. And this really got me inspired because I also have a guitar with that kind of setup. And so I was doing some sound redesign for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. I love making robot sounds, especially with this kind of setup, and I wanted to do something that was a emotive droid sound for the little guy BD-1, and in the vein of Star Wars movies of the past. So I started with just my guitar and the kill switch, no effects, just playing, and this is what we started out with, just trying to hit those sort of emotions. Okay, cool. So I like the pitches I was able to get. I felt like I was able to fit his movements, but I wanted to make this a bit more. We're sound designers. We like to just really flesh things out. So here's my signal flow that we went through. Started with my guitar and put it through a noise gate to get rid of some of the static and an amp. Pretty straightforward guitar stuff so far, nothing special. Next was the EQ. Also pretty normal, but I actually cut out a lot of the low end here. This is a pretty intense EQ. He's a little guy, so I wanted to make sure there wasn't too much bass coming off of him. Next up, this is where things get interesting. This is where I introduced the ring mod. So like we said earlier, super digital. It's also, in my mind, it's used for the voice effects for the Daleks and Doctor Who, and Star Wars and Doctor Who are kind of contemporaries as you were in that time period of their sound design. So I felt it was really fitting here. Another pretty intense EQ. And then Lux, which if you're not familiar with it, is like my favorite sweetener plugin ever. It's got some nice saturation on it. Really, really love that thing. And then a frequency shifter pedal to make it more digital and really affect the pitch as well. And so that went to the output. And I liked this, but wanted more. So I did another layer that was super similar and pitched up, and another layer that is also lower. So now that I did that, fleshed out the rest of the scene, here is how everything sounded in context. So yeah, this was a ton of fun to work on this sound. Thank you so much. So again, as you can see through all this, can be some really impactful ways to use musical instruments, even if you're not a music designer or a composer or anything like that, and purely in sound design to get that kind of specific emotional expression you want, fill out specific frequency ranges and excite that, and also just to try something new and really get out of the usual box that we're in of our computers and our field recorders. Thank you so much again to Game Audio LA and to Glitch City for putting this on. Love to take any questions if you guys have. Thank you so much. Yes. Great question. Oh yeah, so great question. So the question was if this was a direct line or if I mic'd up the amp. It was direct line, and it was an amp cabinet simulator in box. I suppose you could do it in either direction, but I felt, especially for the droid, that it was like coming directly from him. I wanted to have a little more control over that in this situation. But great question, though. Thank you. Yes.
A lot of the projects I work on, we deal with like really full frequency orchestrated music.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're constantly running into as sound designers is just trying to get as much tone as possible out of our sound effects without clashing with that music.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear any perspective you have on sort of overcoming that hurdle, especially using musical sources.
Yeah, absolutely. So for everyone at home watching and anyone who may be in here, question was that with a lot of the projects that he's working on, they have a very full frequency range musical score and how to basically make sound effects that aren't going to clash with that. I do think that obviously it's a case-by-case basis. I'll get into in a second, but at its very core, the idea I was talking about of excitement, you can really pick and choose your frequencies a bit more with things that are very intended for specific frequencies. I think at that point, to answer your question, I'd love to talk about how you guys do it as well and kind of brainstorm, but I feel that being able to just be collaborative with the composers and just be like, all right, are obviously going to go as big as they can, but like it's going to be a little different in every area of the game. It's not always going to be the same, and so just being able to have open communication to figure out what their frequency output is looking like, and for that scene, or if it's the other way around, depends on how the workflow is going. Be like, here's some things we've got here. Let's try to work around that. We can also adjust. So it really depends, but I do think that this does help with that. Just the one thing to make sure, of course, is not doing something that might be like out of key, because then it's going to sound really weird, and that's a definite clash you don't want. So, awesome. Thank you so much for that question. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
I had a brain delay, but I had one.
No worries. I'm familiar with those. Brain delay, yes.
Did you, were you like playing around with this technique and then fitted it for this cue, or did you choose to redesign this video cue and then went looking for a technique?
So I was playing around with this technique before. Someone who I didn't show here was another big sound design inspiration for me in this method is Buckethead, who is another amazing guitarist. But so context, I love Rage, phenomenal, one of my favorites. I feel like Buckethead, I didn't pull it up because not as well known, whatever. But I feel like he has taken this kill switch stuff to just an insane level, and that was where even more of my inspiration came from. And so then I was like, I'm loving what I'm experimenting with here. Oh yeah, Jedi Survivor is like coming out back when I did this, and yeah, that was the whole throughway to that. So it was technique first, and then the clip afterward. So awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of the talks.